Hello and welcome to Roll for Topic, a roundtable discussion about topics related to running role-playing games. I'm Chris Salzman.
And I'm Andy Rao.
It's just us today. So, Andy, I have a special surprise for you. And so, off air, I know that you actually don't have any dice around, but I need you to find a D20.
A D20. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna have to. I'm not a very good dungeon master. My dice are in like a different room. I don't have them on me, so
Yes.
I'll be back 1 sec.
No, this is great. Yeah. So for listeners, you can go.
Okay.
We can go.
I'm gonna leave here, and you. Yeah. All right.
Okay. Yeah, so for listeners, right before we got on, Andy admitted that he didn't have any dice around, and I had a special surprise all planned for him. And I was like, well, should I tell him before we start recording? I decided not to. So we're going to see how long it takes him to gather a D20. He's running. He's almost scared.
I'm back. Yeah.
You got one?
Yeah, I got one.
Oh, okay. Good. All right, you've passed. You were still a good GM.
Okay.
Okay, so Andy, I want to do something. A couple weeks or a week ago or so, or episodes ago, we talked about doing starting a campaign like in media res, sort of like the James Bond intro. Yeah, so I want to try that with you. I just want to see what happens. Okay, so here's the setup. You have just broken through a stained glass window and you're falling 3 stories. You're just like watching all these glass shards kind of like raining down alongside you as you're falling, and you look up and you see that like your mortal enemy has just pushed you out of this window. What do you do?
I reach for something on my person that I can use to pull him down with me.
Okay, all right. Go ahead and we'll roll. We'll just call this like a preparedness roll. Wait, so you tell me, like, Andy, as a person, how prepared are you normally?
As a person, I'm not well prepared. So.
Okay, so you're going to take a -4 on this.
All right, here we go.
Okay, so roll your D20.
Okay, well, with that -4 penalty, I've got a -1 result.
Okay, you begin to grasp around your belt and your pockets and stuff, and you realize that as you kind of like glance up and you see that your mortal enemy is actually holding your utility belt in its hand, and he looks down at you and yells, "Looking for this?" What do? You are now at the 2nd story, falling with the glass alongside of you.
Okay, then I'm falling down like some sort of cathedral or church or something like that.
Yeah, so picture like French cathedral, like Notre Dame.
Okay,
like you're falling like. Yeah.
Well, there's got to be some sort of intensely creepy gargoyle architecture here, which I'm going to attempt to grab.
Okay, all right. How dexterous are you in real life?
Mediocre dexterity. I give myself
so,
a 7 or an 8.
Oh, okay, yeah. All right, we'll call that. We'll say like no penalty, no bonus.
Okay, there we go. Oh, natural 20.
Whoa, natural 20. Okay, you look around and actually, one of the gargoyles on the cathedral, you watch it stick its arm out towards you.
Oh my goodness!
Do you grab it?
How can I say no to that? So of course I grab it. Yes.
Yeah. So it grabs your hand and kind of like swings you back and throws you up on its back, and it starts to take off. And so now you're flying on top of a gargoyle. Oh. What do?
I want to steer it back towards my enemy. So if it does not respond to a point like up there, I will grab its ear and tug it in the direction I want it to fly.
Yeah, I think with the 20, we'll follow that through. Like, so you were able to immediately communicate with this gargoyle beast, and I would say so you've played Dark Souls, so this is like one of those mini boss gargoyles at the top of so for those that haven't played Dark Souls, right, this thing is like 20 feet long once it starts to unfurl like that, and it's actually like you look down, it's carrying a giant pike in its hand as well. This was a good get for you. And it begins to fly back up towards your enemy. Your mortal enemy, though, takes out a long gun, and it's like an anime character long gun. So it's like it's itself 10 feet long. Kind of pulls it out from the back and starts to level at you, and it fires. So roll dexterity for me again. Or how? I guess. Do you want to take it, or what are you going to do when it fires at you?
Yeah, I will. I already rolled, and this roll will make it more entertaining because I rolled a natural 1 this time.
Okay, all right. So it's a 0. I think it hits you. So it hits you in the arm. Your arm is disabled at this point. You're probably your left arm. So you're still hanging on to the gargoyle, although you have lost one of your arms.
Okay.
Yeah, you are. I think you're getting closer, right? This thing is moving quite a bit of air behind it, and you're getting up and kind of level to your mortal enemy. What do you do?
I would like to launch myself off the gargoyle, and barrel into my enemy here, who hopefully is, frantically, whatever, reloading his, ramming the stick down the barrel of the gun or whatever.
Yeah, he is. There's a comically long stick too to push it in. So you can do that. Although let's see, let's call this just an attack.
Okay.
So you as a person, how well do you think you would attack something?
Ooh, yeah. I think I'd have a +0.
Okay, yeah. So we'll go 0 again on that. Okay. Yeah. So go ahead and roll.
Oh my goodness! I rolled another natural 20.
Oh, geez. Okay, yeah. So
this is like a emotional roller coaster of an experience here so far.
Yes, this is great. Yeah. So you leap off the gargoyle, and I think with that, the gargoyle itself actually takes a swing with its pike. It realizes what you're doing. Okay. Yeah, it takes a swing with its pike and trips your mortal enemy, and he drops the gun. It goes clattering, and he's now hanging onto the edge of where he pushed you off. As you jump towards him. Are you going for the kill, or are you going to help him up?
I think with a flourish, I will smirkily look down at him and extend my hand to him, and I don't know what I'll say right now, but in the movie version of this, I have the best one-liner equipped for this, which is, I've been trying to think of a one-liner since you started this little scenario, and I haven't come up with one. So if you've got one, feel free to toss one out there.
I don't, although we can leave that as an exercise for the listener to come up with the perfect one.
Please write in with the one-liner I should have used at that moment.
Yeah, I think he'll reach up a hand towards you and say, please help me up.
I'll try to haul him up, but watch his other hand for the knife I know is coming or whatever.
Okay. The knife comes towards your Achilles heel as you're pulling him up. Roll. We're gonna do a contested check right here. Okay. So I'm gonna roll an attack. You roll how you would approach this. You tell me, how would you approach a knife coming at you?
A knife coming at you? Yeah, I would. I think I would try to just let go of him and kick him away.
Okay.
17.
He swipes. He misses completely. As he's swiping, you have let go of him, and he has nowhere to go with that knife. So he just kind of slashes the air and begins to fall down. And that's where we'll fade out for right now.
Yeah. So the camera, is looking down at him as he falls, like the bad guy in Die Hard or whatever.
Yeah.
He gets impaled on some kind of spike.
Probably the gargoyle throws the pike down at him as he's falling. Ooh. And so it continues. It goes a little bit faster and gets him before he hits the ground.
Okay.
So there you go.
All right, that was really fun. And so my first instinct was when you said, what do? You're falling. My first instinct was well, what do I have? What spells do I have? Do I have a spell that can do something? What equipment do I have? But it was more fun to just, it was just more fun to try to imagine what an instinctive reaction was.
I thought about should I give you a loadout beforehand, but it's no, let's just see what
it was better. It was better that you didn't. Okay.
Well, thank you for indulging me on that. I wanted to see how that would go, to just do a dive into an action scene and see what happens. Turns out it was very fun very fun on my end, so hopefully you enjoyed it.
Yeah, that was fun. Chris told me 10 seconds before we started recording that he was going to surprise me with something, and listener, my blood ran cold.
Yeah.
So this was fun. All right.
Well, let's do what we came here to do and actually talk about running role-playing games, not pretending to run them on air. So I have a D10. I know that you do not have one in front of you. I'm happy to roll on the table.
Yeah, that's fine. Although I do have my D20 here now. I could roll and divide by 2.
Yeah. I'm going to do it, though, because I don't know what would happen if you got, if you got a 1, then it would just be confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got a 6.
A 6. This is an interesting topic. How do you store and care for your game books? How do you use them at the game table?
This is something I think we have danced around this topic a couple times, and I know that it's something that like most game masters love talking about.
Yeah.
is books all the time. I think like it's also an interesting time to have this conversation too, just because we're all playing online if we're playing at all. So you get mixed in with this like actual game books versus PDFs and that sort of thing as well. Let's start with probably the most interesting thing, I guess. Like, what is the book that you have that's in the worst condition?
It would have to be one of a couple of the game core rule books that I used when I first was getting into the hobby. That I read them to death, and then they just got mauled over the course of years of heavy use. Even though I am extremely like careful and nitpicky with books. I don't like cracking the spine. I don't like getting the corners bent. But even with that, some of my oldest books are barely holding together, I would say, from years of use. How about you? Do you have a book that's tattered? You have come more recently into the hobby, so I don't know if you haven't had an opportunity to have a book like get old and tattered.
Yeah, I haven't. I have a couple of like used copies of stuff that are a little bit rough. I'm like, although I'm newer to like role-playing games, tabletop role-playing games, like I've been playing video games and stuff my whole life. So like I got the obsession with keeping things pristine from Nintendo Power magazines. So like,
Yes.
So like, I mean, when I was growing up, it was like, you get Nintendo Power, you read it very carefully, and then like, don't crease anything, don't tear anything out, put it back on the shelf.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. But yeah, probably probably the player's handbook, right? Like that thing, whenever I'm running it, it gets pulled out, and I don't think I mark it up that much necessarily, but it definitely things get folded over, and sticky notes and stuff get added to it.
So how do you annotate books, like for reference? You just said sticky notes. Is that like if you've got to mark your place or you got to remember something, is that what you do, sticky notes? Do you ever take a pen or pencil to the page?
Yeah, that's a good question. I will if I can. So with the more recent like Wizard of the Coast printing, like the way that their paper is, you can't really write on it at all. Like, so I've tried before, like, you can't really annotate it very well. Yeah, so I'll often do sticky notes in there. I'll print stuff off and just like jam it in as well. And then also just note cards, so I will put note cards into like the monster manual. So if I know I'm running something, I know that there's going to be 3 or 4 monsters in there I need to reference, I'll just kind of jam in index cards. Yeah, what about you? How do you handle that?
Yeah, same thing. Mostly sticky notes. Like for much of my life, not just with the game books, with other books, like I said, I really would try to keep my stuff in pristine condition. And so the idea of marking up a book seemed like the worst possible thing I could do to it.
Yeah.
It's funny though, because as I've gotten older, I find that there's something a little sad when I look at a stretch of bookshelf that I have with game books that look pristine and unused. And if I flip through it, I guess it's nice that the pages are not creased or wrinkled in any way, and they haven't been marred by any notes. I guess that's kind of nice, but it also just has a sort of sterile feel. And it's like, I got a lot of fun out of this book, but there's no record of that in this book.
Yeah, there's no artifacts.
Yeah, like so I feel like we might be at the point in the podcast where I'm starting to, repeat anecdotes here. So I apologize if I've shared this before, but I like picking up used game books where I can. And I have come to really love times when I pick up a game book and it's got the artifacts of somebody else having played the heck out of it in there. So I have some honestly pretty funny, some used books I've picked up that are like kind of comically marked up or massively highlighted, or doodles in the sides, or names presumably of people who played through the adventure, stuff like that. It's like, I would like to think that, if were someone to pick up one of my books, they would see evidence of like, oh, someone got a lot of joy out of this book.
Yeah. I have one old monster manual, I think, that has someone's like address in the front, right? Like it's very clearly like a juvenile handwriting, someone's name and address and even phone number. And I had this brief moment a couple of weeks ago where I was like, I should call that number and see. It's like, no, I shouldn't call that number. But like, yeah, it's just like things like that are just really joyful. And it actually makes me think about board games. So board games, at least like more modern ones, will often come with a stack of scorecards in them.
Oh, okay.
As
Yep.
well, right? So like you
Yep.
can, so you'll have like 50 or 100 of these scorecards in, like in a tear off sheet style thing. And like, at least for me, we usually, we'll fill them out and we just kind of toss them back in the box and stuff. But like pulling out those board games and like opening it up and you can see like, oh, I played this game with this person. Right. And it's almost this like built-in way of leaving those trails and those artifacts within the board game. Yeah, it kind of makes me wonder like what you could do if you would design that intentionally into, say, like a player's handbook.
Yeah.
Something like that. Like if there was just a spot in the back that was meant for like, keep all the character sheets here.
Yep.
Like, or like who did this belong to? Like, have a nameplate or in the front.
Yeah, a couple thoughts on that. Yeah, I am reminded of a time at Gen Con I played in the game of a game designer who at the end of the game had everyone who played at the table sign his copy of the book. And so he had a living record of everyone at all these conventions he would take this to demoing his game. And I signed my name in there and there was pages of names in all different handwriting. And it was just like, this would be a treasure, after 10 years of this would be quite something to have on your bookshelf.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, that's so cool.
I had not thought about this exactly, but that idea of building in intentionally some system for recording or archiving a play experience, it kind of calls to mind those, that kind of legacy, I think is a term for it, board game trend that started, I don't know, a decade or so ago.
Yeah.
And I've never really played any of those, but I find the concept intriguing. Those are board games where, like, as you play, I think in theory, you're supposed to, physically change the game, put stickers on the map, tear up cards that can't be used anymore, that sort of thing. I remember when those came out, you see lots of reactions are like, why would I pay, $60 for a game I can play once? But, the flip side of that is like, that's a neat, if you actually play through that sucker, that's a pretty neat bunch of memories that you've recorded down here to look back at.
Yeah, totally. I take umbrage with the like I can only play through it once or only 10 times or something. It's like, because how many games on your shelf have you actually played more than 10 times?
Yep.
Right. Like it is a small number, right? Like, yeah, it's not like you're not pulling those games out all the time. So it's like to me it's more akin to like if you're gonna go see a movie in a movie theater, you're going to spend far more than $60 if you brought 4 or 5 people along with you. So like, monetarily it's like whatever. And like, there's some argument to be made about like, is this crass consumerism and all that? But it's like, put that all aside. Like this is just a cool concept and a cool idea.
Something similar to this had occurred to me when I'm a good bit into running a Band of Blades campaign. And that is a game that it is not designed, for you to mark up the book permanently or anything like that. But that is a good example of the sort of game where you could do something like this. I mean, like realistically, you are not going to run that many games of Band of Blades in your life. Okay. It's not like a generic game like D&D that you can pull up, whenever you're in the mood. It's something, it's got a fairly prescripted, approach to it. You've got to be in the mood for it. You've got to have done prep for it. All the players have to be prepared for it. And that is a game where, you progress through a prescribed series of stages. Of course, there's options and variations in there. And it occurred to me kind of after I got going that I type up lots of notes in between sessions just on my computer in a big text file of what we did and which missions the players went on and what setbacks happened. And I was, I might as well be writing these down in the book in the chapter for each location. I might as well fill the margins with our notes about what we did there, because that would be probably as convenient a record of what we did as anything. And I'm not gonna, Band of Blades is really fun, and I would love to play it again. I imagine when I finish this campaign, I would be happy at the idea of playing it again sometime. But if I did that, I could just buy a new copy of the rule book. It's not that expensive.
Yeah, I mean, even if you use the same one, I mean, I think it would be a small joy every time that you got to one of your
Oh,
recaps
totally, yeah.
to see what they did before. I mean, you could even like work that into the next campaign. It's like, yeah, you get there and you see that there's 6 gravestones of these great heroes that I did a total party kill to.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
So, I'm sorry, I'm talking up a storm here, but
Oh, good.
there are a couple of really recent role-playing games that do have one toe in the pool of, I don't know where this metaphor is going, in the pool of
Okay.
whatever, the legacy type game. The Forbidden Lands role-playing game
I don't know anything about that.
is a sort of old school vibe sort of game where you're exploring a hex map, and you are supposed to it has a like sheet of stickers in the box, and you are supposed to, as people explore hexes on the map, you're supposed to like put stickers of what they find there as permanent additions to the game world.
Cool.
So if they were to if someone else were to adventure in this world later, or if the players were to revisit it, you would have a record of what they found where, because it's and the Heart role-playing game has something kind of similar. I think it's sort of an optional thing you can buy. It's not necessarily in the core rules, but you can also buy like a board game style board map for that role-playing game that comes with stickers that, as you randomly determine what you come across, you plop a sticker on the map at that location to kind of fix it in place.
That's really great.
So yeah, I mean that's a really mild version of that, but that would be, I could imagine a game like Forbidden Lands, it lends itself to pretty long extensive campaigns. I mean, at the end of that you could have a map that's really full of notes and stickers. That would be kind of fun.
Yeah, I wonder like what it is about that is so compelling. So my wife and I just finished a jigsaw puzzle, and it was a really fun experience putting this puzzle together. And we got, like we're done with it. And so tonight she was asking me like, well, can we put it away? And I just had this moment of like, well, I don't want to put it away yet. And there's like no reason why I didn't want to put it away. Because it's like, we have to, like, we need our dining room table back. Like, we're done with the puzzle. Like, do you need to look at it some more? Like, take a picture, it'll last longer, like that sort of thing. Yeah, and so we eventually decided to put it away, and like I had this small amount of like sadness about it too, but also like we needed our dining room table back, so it's like not that big of a deal. But like there's something about the finality of like finishing a puzzle and then like putting it back in the box. It's like you're never going to get the experience of putting that puzzle together for the first time again, like learning all the different ways about how things connect and things. And then so like the thought of doing that again, we're never going to do it again. We don't really have we don't have an artifact of that other than the puzzle back in the box and stuff. So it's just like it's interesting to have that experience, but then also be talking about like this, about like how do you like how to extend the memory of those games, right? Like, because I think this is exactly where we just took this topic and turned it a little bit to like talk a little bit more about like the memories inherent in not taking good care of your games. Your game books and stuff. But yeah, like, so I don't know, like this has been on my mind with puzzles in particular. Like there's no way to like sign the puzzle, I guess, at the end. Or do that other than just being able to talk about it or remember it.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean that's just the human experience, right? I mean, the fun is in the doing of the thing, and we, you might take a bazillion pictures, of an event that was really a vacation that was really fun, and you might flip through them and remember them. But, the fun, you had the fun, and the fun is in the past. So with role-playing games, I mean, I guess you could try to find ways to sort of, remind you of the fun you had, sort of whatever the role-playing game version of is of taking a photo or a snapshots. But I don't know. I mean, it is sort of by its nature just something. The fun comes out of the ephemeral interactions you have with other people at the table, and I mean that's a real joy. But it also is something that you're not going to be able to preserve and relive in the same way, no matter what you try, right?
Yeah. I mean, so it's it's funny to me that we started with like talking about pristine books and like how we don't try to mark them up that much. It's like, and now I'm just wishing that I had just gone to town and ripped pages out and like drawn pictures everywhere. and all that. Yeah, but like maybe let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the second part of this question. How do you actually use books at your table? I think otherwise we'll just keep getting weepier and weepier as we talk about like campaigns and gone past.
That's right. We'll never be young again, Chris.
Yes. Yeah. As far as like using books at the game table, and I think like I know we've both kind of talked about this quite a bit over the podcast. Not that like it's necessary for you to have listened to every episode of the podcast up to this point, but yeah. So for me, like I will, like I only bring the books that I know that I'm going to need that time, at the table. And then with running online, right, like then there's also PDFs and stuff like that. So I try to have everything somewhat organized and on my lap and on desks and stuff next to me. And then when I'm actually running the game, I kind of forget about all that until someone asks me what a rule is, and then I have to go and remember and find the actual book. Yeah, I think the thing that I found like most helpful the last time I was running a longer campaign was taking a little bit of time to print out the specific part of the session that I knew that I was going to be covering. So I'd have more of a printout rather than just like a bunch of haphazard note cards everywhere.
I have a couple reactions to that. One is I'm old enough to remember when PDFs were really coming into their prime as a way of distributing a game book. And things like print on demand was starting to excite imaginations about what you could do. And I remember a lot of buzz in the early days of like games being available in digital form, like usually PDF, but sometimes HTML or whatever. This idea I remember people having that maybe in the future you could create your own game book out of the pieces of the game system that you cared about, right?
Yeah.
So this typically came up in the context of discussions of games like GURPS or Hero or other generic systems that have like more stuff in them than you need for your game because they are trying to cover everything. So what if you could be like, I'm running a gritty urban game that doesn't have divine magic in it, and it only has martial character classes, whatever, so give me internet or technology, compile for me, piece together the parts of the rules that I need to do that and leave everything else out, and give me a rule book that has everything I need and nothing I don't in it. So that was, I don't know, that never came to pass, for some good. I mean, there's an interesting ideas in that. I mean, there's also some obvious problems with it, and obviously it didn't really happen that way. But I don't know why I went down that particular rabbit trail, but just the idea of like, how do you prepare? It's sometimes funny how much you need to prepare for, how much you need to go through your rule book in advance to kind of pull out the stuff you're going to need and get ready to use it. It's an approach we're all very used to taking, so it feels natural to us. But one of the reasons I bring it up is because my mind was kind of blown a couple of months ago by an RPG rulebook I was reading that kind of really upended my idea of what the like physical rulebook was supposed to be doing at the game table. And so I was reading Champions Now by Ron Edwards. It's a quirky, very niche game book. You can Google it and read up on it. I won't go into it. We've talked about it on at least one past episode. But so I'm reading this book, and it is sort of like, the idea of it is it's sort of like the director's cut version of the role-playing game Champions. So it's really quirky, and it's written in the form of like a conversation between the author and you, and it's just straight up, he's talking directly to you, the GM. It's not written like a reference book. It's a guy giving you advice about how to run the game Champions. And so while I was reading it, there's a lot to enjoy about it, but I kept thinking this is the worst organized book I've ever read in my life. Like, I could never use this at the table because like the index was worthless. There's no simple way to look at like the index or the table of contents and figure out where a rule was if I needed to know what's the rules for like invisibility. There's almost literally no way you could find it. And then I realized as I kept reading, this is a game book that it is intended to teach me how to play the game and then never be referenced again. Like,
Oh,
so
okay.
this book is trying to walk me through the process of making my character or getting ready to run a game, writing everything I need to know on my character sheet, and throw the rule book away because whatever I need, I wrote down. It's here on my character sheet. And I've never played a game that didn't come with it with some expectation that that game book was to serve as sort of a physical reference at the table.
Huh.
Um, and people will complain no end when games come out with like inadequate indexes or, you know, they're poorly organized. I don't know. I don't know if that's like a good thing that every game should emulate, but it was a weird thing that I was like, whoa, what if you just read a game book and then you just knew how to play the game and then that was it?
Yeah, that is mind blowing a little bit, and but it also reminds me that that is the majority of players' experience of playing games.
Oh, interesting.
Is yeah, like think about it. Like, I mean, when you're teaching a new player how to play, you don't say like, okay, read the player handbook, like read the book cover to cover. Come to me, then I will teach you like my variation on it, and then we will both reference the rules whenever there's, you know, like a thing that we need to adjudicate.
Yeah.
Like no, you just you all like you decide, or you know the table decides sort of what the rules are, and you relate them back to one another. And again, going back to board games, like I mean, I know like you're the explainer of board games at whenever you play board games. Like I know this because I am the explainer of board games whenever I play board
Yes.
games. Like that's just
I wonder
if you're a
what the Venn diagram overlap between GMs and the people that explain board games
yeah.
is. It's probably pretty high.
Yeah, it's a perfect circle. Like it just yeah. Right. And like I mean think about like every time you've taught a board game to someone, like I mean there's 20% of the time like the people like some people want to see the rules. Like the vast majority of people do not care. They just want to get to playing the game. Like so you relate the rules to them and then you start playing the game.
Yeah.
Like that. And they're never gonna look at it. Yeah, so it sounds like this is exactly how that book is being written, like to the GM. It's just like, well here's how to play.
Yeah.
Go play.
Well, it's just interesting because you know the obvious answer to your question you asked, or at least the obvious answer for me is, you know, when I use my books at the table, I use them as references. You know, I have them sticky noted with the pages I might need to pull up. I use them to flip to the maps of the places I need if I don't have them memorized or I didn't sketch them out myself. And you know that works pretty well. That works well. You know, well enough. You know, it requires or at least benefits from books that are written with this in mind. You know, and we've all seen books that really make it difficult to find stuff at the table, and we've all played games where it's all pretty logically organized and not a problem.
This does make me wonder about playing a game where you like disallow books at the table. Like you say you're not allowed
Yep.
to have them. An experience that I had that I think about a lot is the Ann Arbor District Library RPG Fest that they ran a couple years ago, and hopefully will run again in the future. Like so I ran a couple sessions of D&D, and I was just running a very simple like encounter that I didn't need any notes whatsoever for. Right, so I think I had the GM screen set up just for effect, right?
Yeah.
But like I wasn't referencing anything behind it. I was just rolling behind it like that. And it was a very different way of running a game than having your books all laid out in front of you. Like a very different feel. Like there was never that like going back to reference anything. It was just like, well, I don't have anything written down anyway, so I'm just gonna, you know, keep going with it like that. But I mean, that was very much a case where it's like, well, I have the books internalized somewhat. You know, like I have this encounter internalized enough that I don't need them. So the way that I used the books in that scenario was that I studied beforehand and then put them away.
Yeah.
And, you know, went to the test,
Uh-huh.
as it were. Yeah, and it like that experience has made me think a lot about like how could you run a whole campaign in that mode? Because again, like the players, like their perspective is all sort of what's happening at the table. Like they might have their character sheet. They might have the player's handbook that they're referencing, you know, it's like 50-50
Yeah.
whether or not they're doing it. But like the minute to minute gameplay, they're not also referencing all these books in front of them. Like they're interacting with what's at the table. It just makes me wonder like, yeah, how as a GM I could get to that place too. And if that is better or worse than having all the books in front of me.
One thing you learn quickly, you know, as a GM, I have a lot of ideas about how game books could be written better to be, not even written better, it could be designed better to be used at the table. And, you know, the game book has not really changed much in its design from the early days of this hobby.
Yeah.
Chapters of new RPGs that come out probably roughly correspond in placement and size and emphasis to chapters in early game books. Here's a chapter on the setting, here's a chapter on creating your character, the chapter on equipment, the chapter on combat, the chapter on GMing. I do sometimes feel like we're due for somebody to come along and say there's a different way to convey the information in here, to present it to you. And there's little baby steps that you do see being taken. I've talked before, it's just little stuff can make a difference. Like Monte Cook Games and Numenera and their other games, they have hefty cross references in the margins of each of every page on the rulebook. Just little quality of life things like that kind of make a big difference. Or pages that are printed in such a way that when you look at them from the side, you can see like the chapter delineations by like the color used or something like that. Lots of little things like that, and lots of game companies are doing a good job of some of those little things. But there is that sense that someone with a really great grasp of how books are used as physical objects really needs to step into the RPG hobby and show us how it's done.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm right. I'm with you on that. Yeah, it's like there's something there. Like I think there's always a frustration of like the way that you want to organize information in your brain and then how it's actually organized in the book. I mean, I think partly that's good. It kind of it makes you think in a different mode as well, right? Like, because I mean, you were mentioning like the chapters and stuff. Like that's like putting chapters and stuff is one way to emphasize what's important to you, right? So like if you are picking up D&D and you're like, why isn't the first chapter all about like romance in the game? It's like, well, it's because the book is telling you that romance is not as important as combat, like necessarily, right? Like it's in there, but it's not going to be the most important thing.
There's all how many games have you played? There's like a 7-page chapter that's called like running the game or game rules, and then like a 45-page chapter that's called combat or something.
It's like, well, wait, was I not learning about it?
But it's interesting. I find it's a very different experience when I'm picking up a new role-playing game. It's a really different experience. Like when I start going through this book, I've read books that start you with like a glossary of terms, a dictionary of terms at the beginning. There are games that start you off with like a piece of fiction. There's games that start you off with a like encyclopedia style description of the setting. There's games that start you off with like, all right, let's create a character before you know anything else. There's different ways to move people through books, and like a lot of them will say like, if you're a game master, start with this chapter and then read these ones, and if you're a player, read this chapter over here, but you can ignore the rest. And it's like it's funny, we have this book here, it's for two totally different audiences. I don't know, just some interesting stuff there. We've once again, you tried to start us off on answering the actual topic here, but we've drifted off. But
I think, and we're actually kind of out of time. Although, so I don't know if we answered the question at all. I mean, probably a little bit, like about how to store and care for your game books. But this was a far more interesting conversation to me. Yeah, I think like I want to go hug my books. And think about all the good times. And also like. Cut the spines off and rearrange them at the same time.
I fantasize sometimes about like cutting the spines off and putting some of my Heavilies books in like a spiral binder so they can like lay flat. But I don't think I'm quite that hard committed to my pretentious statements I was making earlier about books to do that. But sometimes I get close. If a game were, if the binding was failing on a book, I would probably be willing to take the step of hacking the pages out and sticking them in a binder or something. But
okay, so here's the final question, I guess. Like, so if that happened to like your player's handbook, for example, and like 5th edition or whatever edition you're playing, are there any sections that you just leave out?
That's interesting. Oh, I don't know. That's a funny question.
Or like anything that you just like immediately would rearrange. I think so. I'll answer first. I think the very first thing I would do is like just rip the book in half, like where the spells start.
Oh yes.
And just put the spells in a different book.
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
right? Like, because you don't.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Because like, how often are you're building a character? Like, someone has a question about a character, so you're looking up the wizard and you're like, okay, you can have 4 spells at this level. Like, okay, but like, which ones can you have? And so you're flipping back and forth and trying to find out like where the wizard spells. It's madness.
Actually, I think if I were to do any sort of surgery on like my D&D books, it would be there is no darn reason this stupid game can't be in one rule book instead of this ridiculous 3 rule books that just like this sacred cow of the RPG industry.
Yeah.
No one else does this because it's dumb. Like, yeah. So rip some of the extra junk out of the player's handbook. Stick 50 pages from the DMG that are actually important, and then stick 30 pages of monsters in there. Come on. If I did some surgery, it would be on all 3 of the core D&D books, and it would be the Andy single volume edition that. So I have a final closing question for you. I don't know. This will be sound like the height of first world problems here, but I've had this dumb thing lately where I have a couple of books that are stupidly valuable that I'm now afraid to use. So, for example, I have and like relatively valuable. We're not talking like pay for my kids' college. So I have like some special edition cover editions of 5th edition books that go for like a hilarious amount on eBay. And it's dumb because now I'm afraid to use them, because even though I don't really plan to sell them, they've been elevated in my mind. They're no longer like a book for me to use and read. They're like an artifact I need to keep on the shelf and make sure it doesn't get scratched.
They're an asset.
Like, I honest to God found myself wondering, do I need to go buy like a second copy of this book that I can actually use? And then I was like, please, that's the worst idea. Never do that, Andy. Yeah. I don't know. Have you ever, do you have that, like, that collector bug in you? Like, if you found out that your player's handbook was worth $2,000, would you stop and put it back on the shelf and put it in a little plastic bag and never touch it? Or would you be like, that's awesome, this is my $2,000 player's handbook that I'm hauling around in my backpack and scribbling notes in?
Yeah, no, I would so I have there's a game for the Super Nintendo called Earthbound that came in this like oversized Super Nintendo box, and it came with a full strategy guide with it as well. I do not have the box. I still have the cartridge, and I have the strategy guide. And the strategy guide is in such condition, and it is valuable enough on eBay that like I'm afraid to touch it. Like the last time I checked, it was like in the $200 to $300 range.
Okay,
and this is for like essentially like a throwaway strategy guide.
It has no value.
And the cartridge itself is like ranges. It used to be a couple $100s and stuff like that. Yeah, so I have this problem where it's like I can't show that to my kids, right? Because it's a very colorful, fun strategy guide to look through. Like, I loved looking through it as a kid. So I have this problem too. And I think like you had actually said to me once, one way to think about it is if you didn't have this thing, would you pay that much money to acquire it yourself? And if the answer to that is no, then go ahead and sell it.
Yeah.
Like, and then go use the money in something else. Like, in the theory, that makes total sense. But in practice, I'm keeping that Earthbound strategy guide on the shelf inside of a plastic bag for who knows how long. But yeah, I mean, and it's so like, and especially when you're talking about like antiques, essentially, like what if it goes up 10 times and 10 times the price in the next few years or so? Then you're going to be kicking yourself if you sold it right now. Yeah. So I don't know what the answer to that is, other than, you should probably buy that second copy.
Yeah. I mean, it probably would pay off. A couple of years ago, I posted on like an online BattleTech group. I have a really old BattleTech miniature that's really rare. It came in like a tie-in product, so you couldn't buy it at like the regular store. It's just been gathering dust in my basement for years. So I posted some photos of it on a BattleTech group online. I was like, is this what I think it is? And do I have all the pieces? And how should I paint this thing? And it was really interesting to see the responses I got. So like a lot of the responses were like, oh my goodness, that's really valuable. You really got a prize. Keep that sucker safe. And you'll get a good price for it someday. And then there were these people kind of reacting against that in the comments, and they were like the like, oh great, another wonderful rare miniature is gonna like stay in someone's collection, and they're, is gonna get filed away and never see play on the table, which is what it was designed to do. And there was surprisingly bitter. There's some. I mean, it was an online interaction, so of course it was surprisingly bitter. But there was surprisingly strong opinions. Some people were really offended that no matter how. I mean, this is a miniature that, like, you don't want to like risk breaking it. I mean, it's a miniature that cost $7 in 1983, and now it costs many hundreds. But I did feel the frustration of those people going like, you just told this guy to just hide it away when, this thing was made for kids to play with.
Yes.
So anyway.
Yeah.
Then there was the third type of people. I learned an important lesson because I spent weeks getting direct messages from people trying to buy it off me.
Oh,
so, that was.
Yeah.
I learned a number of important lessons. But anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. There's another one of my hobbies is vintage hand tools.
Oh, neat.
So like for woodworking.
Yep.
And stuff like that. And the same exact arguments happen about vintage hand tools that happen about collectibles in any other space. But then it also has this added weight of like, most of these tools were built for like someone to actually make furniture out of and stuff, right? So like you have this thing that like people, it was meant to be abused in a shop and used and sharpened and like used up.
Yeah.
Not even played with, right? Like used up to make furniture and stuff. And like, then people are treating it like it's this sacrosanct thing that you need to put inside of a display case and stuff. And so there's this argument of like, should it become a user, or should it become they have some derogatory terms and stuff for it. Should it sit on a shelf like that? And it's like, it's just this very strange thing. And like the market too is getting all wonky because of pandemic stuff as well. Yep. So stuff that used to be super cheap is now super expensive, and everybody's wondering, is the bottom gonna drop out and stuff. And it's just like, at some point you're just like, we should just use it, right? Like we should use these things is sort of what I come down to. It's like, let's just use it. It's fine. Like you're not going to send your kid to college on this. If you have something super valuable and it is the sort of thing, like it's a one of a kind, like it's the very first BattleTech miniature that was ever made. It's going to be like $100,000, belongs in a museum style thing. Like, yes, then we can have that conversation. But then there's this whole like, the long tail on that drops off so fast to just like, don't worry about it.
Yeah. I think you're right. Okay. But we've gone past our time here, so we should wrap this up. So, hey Chris, I really enjoyed that conversation. I think anyone who is listening and hoping for an actual answer to the questions that the topic raised, I can only apologize to you, but
like in all things, our answer is do whatever you want.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Chris, why don't you sign us out?
Yeah. All right. Well, I've been Chris Salzman.
I've been Andy Rao.
And remember, if your players are having fun, you're a great GM.